Today's guest is Samuel Navarro. He's a strategic account executive for health IT at Microsoft. Big fan here. Samuel previously worked for the GSA and the Army, and he's an ACT-IAC fellow as a graduate of Voyagers 2016, which is how Samuel and I met. We interact in ACT-IAC, we interact here in the DC area at networking groups, and thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It's really great to see you.
Thank you for having me, Jerry. Really, really excited to finally be on the podcast.
So for those who don't know you, haven't heard a bit about your background, talk about where you're from, who you are, and what you do.
Sure. So, hey, everybody. Just a pleasure to be on the pod, and thank you guys for tuning in. So my name's Sam Navarro. I'm originally from Long Island, New York, born and raised. And back in the early 2020s or the early 2000s, I'm dating myself a little bit here. I had to make a decision fork in the road, whether I was going to go to college or do something else. So my career kind of started a little bit by accident in IT. I was actually, Jeremy, believe it or not, a pre-med student already accepted to go to Pace University in New York. And then super major incident happened that I think we all remember during that time frame. 9/11 happened.
Oh, yeah.
So I had a fork in the road where I took the decision to go into the military, public service, and put my career that I thought was going to be in medicine on the back burner for a little bit. And so I took this test called the ASVAB, didn't know what it was, just took it as fast as I could. My idea was I was going to be an infantryman or drive a tank or something like that, right? I didn't know that you did IT in the military, so to speak. But somehow, some way, the recruiter at the very end said, hey, you scored kind of good on the technical aspect of this test. We think you should be a technologist, right? And I think we were all patriots in that time frame. And in the passion of things, I said, you know what? If that's where my country wants me to serve, that's what I'll do. So after basic training in Fort Jackson and then AIT, or my training in technology in Fort Gordon, I think it's Fort Liberty today, I was sent to Germany, where I spent 11 years in Germany, and out of there went to Iraq for a year. Went to Georgia for like another 6 months, Republic of Georgia, which I'd call my family. I'd be like, hey, I'm in Georgia. They'd be like, are you in Atlanta or in Augusta? No, Tbilisi, wrong Georgia. But I served in Georgia and spent most of my adult life overseas just serving. And once I got married and my wife and I decided to have a family is when we made a tour back to the United States and got hired by GSA. So had 9 years there working in telecommunications to large IT solicitations, and got to learn the business side, and then helping agencies deploy that technology into their environments, where I finally came across Azure and just working with Microsoft products and capabilities. And we did a lot of great work within the CDC and got offered a job at Microsoft. And ironically enough, started out thinking I was going to be in medicine, went into technology. Now full circle, I'm in technology / healthcare, IT, medicine. So life has an interesting way of bringing us back to kind of the root of the beginning, which is how can I serve people now, not in a medical capacity, but in a technical capacity, providing healthcare to as many people as we possibly can.
Wow. Now when you were stationed in Germany for 11 years, was that all at the same base, or did they move you around a little bit? I normally it's like I'm familiar with the military. It's like a 4-year stint if you're married, 2-year stint if you're not, right? And then they move you. So how did you end up staying over there for 11 years?
Yeah, the first plane I caught, I'll be honest, I was trying to go to Fort Drum, New York, as close as I can to home. And the Army was like, hey, you're like a private in the Army, so you go where we tell you to go. And I'm so glad they did that. I had such a blast in Germany. You got the experience of going to every single country around there. Everything's so close and so convenient to get to. So yeah, I started out in Mannheim, Germany, then went down to Bavaria, to a small place in the middle of the Black Forest called Grafenwehr. And then my last 4 years, I was in Wiesbaden by Frankfurt.
Okay. Very familiar. My father was in the Air Force, and I went to high school at Bitburg Air Force Base in Bitburg, Germany. So I'm familiar with the geography, if you will.
For sure. And it's such a great host nation. I can remember going out at first and just speaking English, and the locals knew English. I learned that they learned English since the third grade. So that we were spoiled, absolutely spoiled. Everyone treated us very kindly, and it was a great host nation to be in.
And I'm curious because I know the Air Force, but I don't know the Army so much. What kind of IT, like help desk? What kind of stuff was that?
So I was in what they called a mobile data package, which at a moment's notice, they would put a bunch of servers that were in the back of these 2-ton trucks and Humvees on the back of C-130s. And they would fly us out to the middle of nowhere. And our job was 8 hours from hitting the ground, we had to have comms up.
Wow.
Connected to a satellite, encryption up, high side up and low side. All technology had to be going at a moment's notice. And we would do this training over and over and over again. We had what we called a signal field out in Mannheim. And then in Grafenberg, we had our own signal field where sometimes they would just keep us on alert. And we would jump in our vehicles and go out to signal field. And the test was, can you get on a satellite and have communications up in 8 hours? And at first I was scratching my head, why 8 hours? But when you're finally in a war zone, you realize why, right? If you can't communicate, you can't orient yourself, you can't organize the troops. So once I went to Iraq, it became a little bit more, realistic on why that milestone needed to be met. So I traveled around with all of the combat arms in Iraq, and a lot of what I did was set up listening and observation posts. So we would relay a lot of communications that were coming from command to the different communications officers, and they would relay it to the troops on movements, and everything relied on comms. So it was fascinating to kind of see the fruit of our labor finally when we went to battle, and the lives we were able to save and the things we were able to do thanks to communications.
Wow. So you were basically doing the modern day equivalent of the little box with wires we see in the old movies, right? The World War II movies, and they're running the cable right out to the foxhole and then taking it back to the main tent. That you were doing the wireless equivalent of that.
So spot on, Jeremy. And true story, that was my job. As soon as the lowest ranking person grabs the greatest job, obviously. So yeah, my job was from the time we got the shot to the satellite, somebody had to run that cable exactly all the way out to the LPOP, listen to observation posts. And you're it, E3, right? Private, you got to run that cable. So yeah, you had to do it with a spirit of excellence, right? The sergeant would say, "Do it with a smile on your face, and right, and look happy while you do it." But yeah, you're right. Connectivity was based on cabling, wiring, and finally we did frequencies as well in certain occasions where troops were close enough, right, for the kind of communications we were doing. But yeah, for the most part, we had to run Cat5 cable or fiber cable, right, and bury it, to make sure that it wasn't going to get sliced and diced by all the great tracked vehicles that were going over it.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I can picture it. That would be an experience. So as you look back at your career, I'm curious, like, was it natural for you to come to GSA? What made that transition happen for you?
That's a great question, because I had a great mentor in the military called Colonel Holland, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Holland, and took me under his wing, and he said, "You know what, Sam, you kind of know this environment of appropriations, right? Every single year we build a plan of action and milestones. We send up what we thought our budget would be for the year, and then we get that appropriated all the way from Congress to DoD on down to us." And his recommendation to me was I should go to a working capital agency where it was fee for service, where instead of getting appropriations, now you kind of have to earn your keep. It's kind of run a little bit more efficiently, more like, we don't like to say this in government, but more like a business. And so there were two agencies that were directly in my line of sight. One was DISA and one was GSA. And I tell you what, Jeremy, out of both interviews, I went back to Colonel Holland and I said, I totally bombed the GSA interview. I didn't know what the FAR was. I couldn't spell the FAR, right? I was very good at the technical questions, but the acquisition questions, I just did not know how to answer them. It wasn't my cup of tea. So I completely said, I'm not going to get hired by GSA. And luckily enough, I got my tentative offer from them before I even got it from DISA.
Wow.
And so I accepted it because I said, you know what, there's obviously a lot for me to learn within business IT and the space of acquisitions, since I completely, debacle all of those acquisition questions. And I tell you what, it was such a good decision, because once I came to GSA, I got to learn, right, how the government consolidates procurements to try to get the best bang for the buck, to meet economies of scale, and drive a lot of savings for taxpayers. And then on top of that, I got the privilege of working with every single agency and not just one.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like GSA is that one agency where you can go and no matter what you have a passion in, whether it's education or transportation or defense, right, you can find a space to contribute. And I started being the core for the third largest telecommunications contract in government with a lot of great mentors in GSA that I got to really lean on. Mary Davy being one of them. If she listens to this, I'm going to send this to her, this link once it's posted. Shout out to her. As a senior executive in our agency, she was always available. She was like literally, I literally didn't think she meant it, but she meant it. She was always available, always checking in on me and seeing how I was doing. So I got to see a different side of a different style of leadership and got exposed to the acquisition technology side that was more complex than just the ones and zeros, so to speak, right? It was now about the dollars and cents and how we could drive a lot of value for taxpayers through technology. So slowly but surely made my way up all the way to centers of excellence where we were helping not only buy it, but deploy the tech, which was really, really good work that was being done. And I just am completely indebted to GSA and the opportunity they gave me to expand my horizons, learn a little bit more, and the chance that they put in giving me that opportunity to go and learn about that side of technology.
Wow. Yeah. I love it. I love it when people are excited and have lots of positive things to say about the experience they've had at a federal agency. And hopefully, if you're a young person out there, I don't know if you be listening to this podcast, but hopefully it's shared with you that we need more of people like you, Sam, and young Sam to come into government so we can make a difference.
For sure. And I tell you what, I think that finally, I think on the IT side in government, we're getting it. You don't have to have all of these credentials and right spiffy certificates, even though those are great to get. Right, I highly recommend folks invest in yourself. But if you have some sort of an appetite and an inclination to learn, I think that government's done a great job in pathways and all sorts of different avenues to get talent into government. Right, human capital is what drives the innovation and all the things that we do in government. And you're spot on, Jeremy. If anyone's out there and you have even an inclination to get into tech, try the federal government, especially if you're in the DMV area. I mean, there's not a shortage of opportunities, and you're going to be really immersed into some of the most complex challenges, which are going to help you grow as a professional and as a technologist, for sure.
Absolutely. So, Sam, when you look at your career and you think about things you encountered along the way, maybe roadblocks, maybe just small hurdles, what's something that you would think, man, I wish it was done differently. I wish it didn't have to be that way. And I'll caveat it to say, you and I don't have to come up with a new way to do this. And we're not even saying that that way is wrong. We're just saying, man, there's got to be a way to make it more efficient. What's something that you see when you look back?
Look, hindsight 2020, and even today, I hope that there's a different way to onboard innovative emerging technology faster.
Hmm.
Right? I think the capital that government works on is trust, and public trust needs to be maintained, and hence our risk tolerance is not as high as in the private sector. But I do believe that there are shining examples out there where there's a balance to be made between risk tolerance and pushing the envelope on how to drive more innovation for the federal government. I say this because now the space that I work in is the most expensive line item in the government's budget, right? If you were to look at the government's balance sheet today, number one on the very top is Medicare, second is Social Security, third is defense. And that was not the case when I was graduating high school, right? The number one thing in the line item budget was defense. And now we have double the amount of people on Medicare rolls now than we did in the early 2000s. And a lot of complex challenges, from how do we deal with remote patient monitoring is a technology that's out there today for folks who are in health deserts, and that specialist may be 50, 60 miles away from where you're at. And they need to put you on a great treatment plan for diabetes, right? There's so many challenges within this space that are really looking, are ready for, are primed for emerging technology to be introduced to bring a more cost efficient and effective answer. And you and I, Jeremy, talked a little bit about this because your son's a cybersecurity expert as well, right? Cybersecurity is important, right? FedRAMP to ATO process to the other aspects. But how do we expedite that and make sure we check off all the boxes and mitigate risk while delivering a lot of these emerging techs to drive value for citizens is going to be, I think, an area where government can do better, right? And can look at ways to innovate and push ourselves a little bit, because at the end of the day, it's people who are in the most disadvantaged and most unequitable positions that are relying on the support to get to them the most. And I think only in government do we have the ability to make an impact on your everyday citizen's life, like many other places can't. So I really am leaning on, and now that I'm in industry, I'm an advocate for, I want to partner, right? If you are a government technologist out there and you're looking for ways to do automated ATO or compliance in a more efficient way, how do we partner with you and provide you all the tools that we possibly can to help drive innovation and drive an example, right, that other agencies can leverage for their enterprises as well?
Yeah, you raised such a really important point, and I heard it recently from another friend. Government's level of risk tolerance is low, right? It's public dollars. We're trying to do best for the taxpayer. We do make mistakes already, and that gets a lot of press, negative press, and so that drives further keeping our heads down and making decisions that are risk averse. But you're absolutely right that for things to move forward, find better ways to deliver services, as you said, to the desert locations where there's technology lacking. I used to work at USDA many, many years ago, and one of their sub-agencies was rural development, and we still have a rural internet problem across the nation. And that would hinder really interesting, positive, health technologies like home monitors of some sort or whatever from being able to be implemented. And so how do we solve that problem, right? Gosh, there's so many great problems that could be solved with innovation out there, and then with the right leadership within government who can take a nuanced risk.
Yeah.
But the regulations and the memos and the policies in government don't structure us well for risk taking. In fact, the cyber stuff takes us the opposite direction. It takes us even more away from acceptance of risk. So I would say overall, this is a problem. Not only come to us with new technologies, come to us with new policies. Like, how do we do what we need to do with policies that let us be a little more, take a little more risk in a way that isn't really a risk, right? It mitigates the challenges of a risk.
Yeah. Another area that I was involved in when I was in GSA was the telecommunications area. And there's infrastructure out there that's been out there since probably Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. Right?
Yeah.
And you're right. We were interacting with the National Weather Service, and they put out this fancy brand new satellite that was able to detect inclement weather, right? And we've seen kind of the impacts of inclement weather here recently. But imagine the folks that are out in rural areas that now can't get the early notification from their National Weather Service office in a timely manner because the infrastructure is not there to do that.
Yeah.
Right. They have radio still, but let's face it, a lot of us don't even tune into our radios anymore, right? A lot of us either you're getting the notification, and thankfully I live in an area where I could get the notification through my smartphone device, right, through broadband. But there's a lot of folks out there that live in areas that that's not the case. And so you're spot on. A lot of the technology that we were trying to roll out was like, well, there is no risk management framework for 5G, right? Or some of these other technologies at the time, at least, probably now it's advanced, but at the time, at least, it was like, well, what's the security controls, right? Do we have the NIST special publication? And hats off to a lot of the folks that are in these agencies, but you're right. How do we build in policies with the right technologies to to move this process a little bit faster is really the challenge that I think a lot of smart folks in government are dedicated to. And you're right, Jeremy. No one pays attention until it's broken.
Yeah.
So hats off to my brothers and sisters in government. I'm there when you guys get all the accolades and awards and ACT-IAC events in silence, but I'm cheering for you guys, right? We're all cheering for you guys to hopefully elevate the game, right? Bring us up to where we need to be as a nation, right? And as a federal government space.
Yeah. And with great partners. As you know, we participate in ACT-IAC. A lot of what government does relies on innovative companies, large, small, medium, whatever, to bring solutions to bear. Because, I mean, I've been in government quite a while, quite some time, and there is some truth to the challenge of keeping government knowledgeable. Like, we can send people to training, we can certainly keep their education going, but there are some limits to that in terms of, like, we don't have a lot of super sciencey people in government. There are agencies with super sciencey people, but, like, what if I need one?
Yeah.
Right. I can't just create a position. I have budget caps, and I have hiring caps, right? Number of people I want. And now I want a super sciencey person. How do I get them? I know my last agency worked in the foreign aid space, and they did big projects like power plants or water treatment or sewage treatment, whatever would, generate economic development. And they came up with a really great contracting model to hire the super special scientists, right? When needed. So you only paid for them when you needed them, and then you didn't have to pay for them when you didn't need them. And we need stuff like that for things like quantum and things like, some of these cyber challenges. But to do that, we need to figure out how to free up money from other things. So it's such a balancing act.
Yeah, and that's why I'm a big fan and advocate for small businesses. I mean, you and I were talking about just the LLM space, right, and AI,
Yeah.
and you would think that a lot of the innovation is coming from the big dogs, right? And what's fascinating for me working in this space is just in Azure, and I'm sure it's the same in Google and AWS. We have thousands upon thousands of LLMs deployed, not by us, but by small businesses that they focus on these very niche areas of the market, and they're able to just become super subject matter experts and drive a lot of value. And I'm so grateful that government's made a concise effort to bring these people to the surface, right? Small Business Administration, by giving loans and giving access to capital. I know when I worked in GSA, we had STARS 3.
Yep.
It was a big area where you can go and do a direct award. Now you can reduce your procurement action lead time. Instead of going through a full solicitation, $4.5 million can get you access to that human capital that you need to drive that innovative project. I think government has tapped into something there, which is real, which is a lot of these small businesses really are specialized to the point where you can get the human capital you need at a good deal too.
Yeah.
Now you don't have the overhead as well. And I tell you what, ACT-IAC has been great in bringing that kind of to the surface on the value out of small businesses and why we should make sure we're leveraging them as much as we can. Not only that, but they're the backbone of the economy, right? I think 70% of Americans are hired by small businesses. And that's why Microsoft, we work with a lot of small businesses as well. Because imagine now we're able to tell them, hey, here are our tools.
Yep.
How best can it help us solve X? Go, right? And give us feedback, right?
Right.
And so it's been great to partner on this side and also on the federal side. But you're so right. trying to find smart folks is a challenge for all of us. But I think tapping into small businesses and a lot of these areas where there are niche requirements has been really valued for the federal government and the federal space in general.
Totally agree. So Sam, what's coming up for you here in the near future? We can even say what's coming up in the new year. We're getting close to that. What's coming up for you here soon?
So what's coming up for me is helping the Centers of Medicaid and Medicare push forward new technology within AI. For a lot of agencies, the largest deployment of generative AI that you'll do in your agency is Copilot. And getting generative AI to the fingertips of every single user in your enterprise is huge.
Yeah.
Imagine how much more of a challenge a lot of these cybersecurity threats are with the power of AI if you don't have the right role-based access security controls in place, or data labeling isn't in place the right way it needs to be to make sure that folks only getting access to the information they need to gain access. And what's inspiring and a great challenge for us is we're deploying this in an area that has a lot of HIPAA data, right? The last thing Jeremy or Sam want is our medical information, right? accessible out there for everyone to consume. So it's a huge challenge, but a great opportunity to say, if we could deploy it here, we could deploy it anywhere, right? We could deploy it in the defense space. We could deploy it in the intelligence space. If we can protect your health information, we really have proven that this really works, even in sensitive areas where there's sensitive information. And then, Jeremy, last but not least, this is something I have to fix before I retire, right? Before I get to Medicare, hopefully I was a catalyst for helping Centers for Medicaid and Medicare deploy AI technology responsibly. So huge responsibility. Hats off to all of the civilian folks that we're working with across the OCIO office and the programs, but we're up for the challenge. And not only in a way to deploy technology effectively, but efficiently as well, save the taxpayer some dollars while we're at it, and expand access to healthcare. It is all around a good thing, and something that motivates me when I get up in the morning to come to work and do the best I can.
Well, Sam, I'll be rooting for you because I too will need to take advantage of those services. So I want it to be very successful. I mean, generally, we want all these things to be successful for.
Not too soon, though, Jerry, right? Not too soon.
No, not too soon. No, not at all. Well, Sam, it's been a great conversation. I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I enjoy getting together with you and having chats with you. So look forward to our next one in the future.
For sure. Thank you for having me. And again, just shout out to everyone who tuned in. Appreciate you guys for listening to us for a little bit, and looking forward to connecting with everyone, all the conferences here soon.